When people wonder, what's the right time for me to retire? They're usually asking something far more meaningful underneath the surface. They're really asking, am I going to be all right? Will my savings hold up? Will I finally feel calm? Will I regret walking away too soon? Or even worse, will I regret staying too long? Because retirement is not only a money choice, it's emotional, it's deeply personal. It marks the end of one season of life and the uncertain start of another. And after spending decades working, sacrificing, saving, commuting, worrying, and carrying endless responsibilities on your back, you want reassurance that when you finally leave your career behind, you're stepping into security instead of financial uncertainty. But here's something many people fail to understand. Retirement is not only determined by how much money you saved, it's also shaped by when you decide to retire, and that timing can completely alter the outcome. The specific month you retire can influence your taxes, your Medicare costs, your Social Security payments, your healthcare expenses, your investment planning, and ultimately how much of your money actually remains in your pocket over the next 10, 20, or even 30 years. That's why financially successful retirees rarely wake up one morning and announce, "I'm exhausted, I quit." They approach retirement strategically, they pay attention to the calendar, they analyze the numbers, they think years ahead, and they carefully position themselves so they can retire feeling confident instead of anxious. Sadly, many hardworking people do exactly the opposite. Some choose to retire during the holidays because it simply feels appropriate. Others leave after a birthday because it sounds meaningful. Some step away only because they're emotionally drained, burned out, and completely exhausted. And honestly, that feeling is understandable. After years of dealing with deadlines, workplace politics, stress, inflation, rising medical expenses, and uncertainty, there eventually comes a moment when your mind and body quietly say enough. But emotions alone should never determine your retirement date, because one poorly timed retirement decision can silently cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And the frustrating part is that most people don't recognize the mistake until years afterward. That's why today we're going beyond the ordinary retirement discussion. We're talking about the smartest periods of the year to retire, the largest mistakes people make when selecting their retirement timing, and how to position yourself financially so retirement becomes one of the most rewarding seasons of your life instead of one filled with stress and regret. And believe me, this matters far more than most people realize, because retirement is not simply about ending your career. It's about protecting your future. It's about building freedom. It's about finally waking up without anxiety sitting heavily on your chest. It's about having the ability to enjoy your mornings, your loved ones, your health, your hobbies, your travels, your grandchildren, and your life without constantly worrying whether your money will outlive you. That's the true objective. And timing plays an enormous role in making that possible. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is retiring at the end of the year. At first glance, leaving work in December sounds ideal. It feels organized. It feels symbolic. You finish the year, walk away from your job, and begin January officially retired. Emotionally, it makes total sense. You might even collect year-end bonuses, unused PTO payouts, commissions, or vacation cash outs. Many people think, why not collect one final paycheck before leaving? But financially, retiring at the end of the year can create problems most people never expect. Here's the reason. Imagine this. You already worked nearly the entire year. That means you earned a full salary. Maybe you also received bonuses, investment income, dividends, or business earnings throughout the year. Then suddenly, during that same tax year, you begin withdrawing from retirement accounts. Maybe you start receiving pension payments. Maybe you begin collecting Social Security. Maybe you roll over your 401k. Maybe you pull money from an IRA to cover living expenses. Now all those income sources begin stacking together, and suddenly the IRS sees one thing, an unusually high income year. That can push you into a higher tax bracket much faster than expected, and once that happens, the consequences can snowball. A larger portion of your Social Security income becomes taxable. Your Medicare premiums could increase later because of IRMAA charges. You may lose healthcare subsidies if you're under 65. Capital gains taxes may rise. and your overall retirement strategy becomes less efficient right from the start. That's what makes this so painful. You spent your entire life building retirement security only to accidentally give a larger piece of it back through taxes simply because of poor timing. And most people never saw it coming. But taxes are not the only concern. Retiring late in the year can also eliminate strategic opportunities that may have helped you save money for years ahead. For example, many retirees benefit from Roth conversions early in retirement. Why? Because once your employment income disappears, you may temporarily fall into lower tax brackets. That creates an opportunity to move money from traditional retirement accounts into Roth accounts at lower tax rates. And that matters because Roth money can continue growing tax-free for the rest of your life. But if you work nearly the entire year, your salary may already fill those lower tax brackets before you even have the opportunity to use them. In other words, the opportunity disappears. And sometimes delaying retirement by only a few months or retiring earlier in the year instead can create dramatically different outcomes over time. This is why retirement planning is not only about investments, it's about coordination. Everything connects: taxes, healthcare, Social Security, income timing, withdrawals, Medicare, and spousal planning. A smart retirement strategy looks at the entire picture. Now let's discuss healthcare for a moment, because this is another area where timing matters tremendously. Many people underestimate how stressful healthcare transitions can become during retirement, especially if they retire suddenly. Let's say someone retires in late December and their employer healthcare coverage ends immediately afterward. Now suddenly they're scrambling during the busiest season of the year trying to understand when Medicare begins, how COBRA works, whether ACA coverage makes more sense, which deadlines apply, what penalties could happen, and whether they'll experience gaps in coverage. That's a lot to process during what's supposed to be an exciting life transition. And unfortunately, mistakes in healthcare planning can become extremely expensive. That's why many strategic retirees actually prefer retiring earlier in the year or around mid-year instead, because it gives them breathing room. It gives them time to coordinate coverage carefully instead of rushing through major decisions under pressure. Now, if we're discussing the smartest times to retire financially, there are usually 3 periods that stand out most clearly. The first is retiring early in the year, typically between January and March. This can be incredibly powerful for people focused on tax efficiency. Why? Because your earned income for that year remains relatively low. And that lower income creates opportunities. You may have room to complete Roth conversions at lower rates. You may keep your Social Security taxes lower. You may reduce future Medicare premium increases. You may strategically manage capital gains and create a cleaner financial foundation for retirement moving forward. Think about it this way. The first year of retirement often establishes the tone for everything that follows. And if you can begin that chapter with flexibility and lower taxable income, you give yourself more control over your future. That control matters because retirement should not feel like financial survival. It should feel like freedom. Another excellent retirement window is mid-year around May through July. This approach creates a balanced transition. You still earn part of your annual salary. You may still receive bonuses or benefits, but you avoid many of the year-end tax complications that can happen later. Mid-year retirement also gives people time to mentally transition into retirement instead of going from full-speed work mode to complete disengagement overnight. And emotionally, that adjustment is much bigger than most people expect. Many retirees imagine retirement will feel like a permanent vacation. Then reality arrives. The structure disappears, the routine changes, the identity connected to work slowly fades, and suddenly uncertainty appears. That's why easing into retirement can actually be healthier emotionally and financially. Mid-year retirement also works especially well for people approaching age 65 because it allows smoother coordination with Medicare enrollment and healthcare planning. Now let's talk about milestone birthdays, because this is another extremely important factor many people overlook. Certain ages unlock major financial opportunities. Age 59 and a half allows penalty-free access to retirement accounts. Age 62 opens early Social Security eligibility. Age 65 unlocks Medicare. Age 67 may provide full retirement age benefits depending on your birth year. Age 73 begins required minimum distributions for many retirees. These milestones matter because they affect your available options. And retirement planning is ultimately about maximizing options. For example, retiring immediately after turning 65 may help you coordinate healthcare far more efficiently. Retiring after full retirement age may increase guaranteed Social Security income significantly over time, and waiting even a few additional years before claiming Social Security can dramatically increase monthly income for life. That's especially important because many people underestimate longevity today. Retirement is no longer just a 10-year chapter for many Americans. People are living 20, 25, even 30 years in retirement. And that means your decisions today can echo financially for decades. This is why thoughtful planning matters so much. Not because retirement should feel complicated, but because small mistakes today can become very large regrets later. One of the saddest conversations I have with retirees is when someone says, "I wish I understood this sooner," especially when the mistake could have been avoided with proper planning. And unfortunately, there are several retirement mistakes I see repeatedly. One of the biggest is what I call the tax avalanche. This happens when too many financial events collide in one year. A person works the full year, receives bonuses, sells investments, starts pension income, claims Social Security, takes IRA withdrawals, and suddenly their tax return becomes a disaster. Not because they did something illegal, but because nobody coordinated the timing. That's the difference between reacting emotionally and planning strategically. Another major mistake involves Medicare enrollment. This catches people off guard constantly. Some retirees assume Medicare starts automatically. Others misunderstand enrollment windows, and some delay enrollment too long because they're still covered through work, only to later discover they misunderstood the rules. The penalties can last for life. Imagine paying permanently higher premiums because of a timing mistake. That's why healthcare planning deserves just as much attention as investment planning. Then there's Social Security. This topic is deeply emotional because many people feel pressured to claim benefits as early as possible. Sometimes out of fear, sometimes because of burnout, sometimes because they worry Social Security may not exist later. But claiming benefits early can permanently reduce monthly income significantly, and that lower amount follows you for life. Now, in certain situations, taking Social Security early absolutely makes sense, but it should be a strategic decision, not a panic decision. The timing should align with your taxes, your health, your investments, your longevity expectations, and your spouse's financial future. Which brings us to another huge mistake, failing to coordinate retirement as a couple. Retirement planning changes dramatically when two people are involved. One spouse may still be working, one may claim Social Security earlier. Healthcare coverage may depend on one employer plan, tax brackets may shift, survivor benefits become important, required distributions may affect household taxes later, everything becomes interconnected. And when couples fail to coordinate their retirement timing together, unnecessary financial stress often follows. But here's the encouraging truth. Most retirement mistakes are preventable. That's the beautiful part. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need millions of dollars. You do not need to understand every line of the tax code. You simply need a thoughtful plan, a strategy, and a clear understanding of how the decisions you make today affect your future tomorrow. Because retirement should feel empowering, not frightening. You spent decades working for your future. You sacrificed weekends. You endured stressful jobs. You pushed through uncertainty. You carried responsibilities. You saved when money was tight. You kept moving forward even during difficult seasons. And now you deserve a retirement built on confidence instead of confusion. You deserve mornings without alarm clocks and evenings without financial anxiety. You deserve the freedom to enjoy your life instead of constantly worrying about market swings, taxes, or unexpected expenses. But that kind of retirement rarely happens accidentally. It happens through preparation. It happens through intentional decisions, and sometimes it happens simply because someone took the time to choose the right retirement date instead of rushing into the wrong one. That's why retirement planning is not only about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about carefully designing the next chapter of your life. Because retirement is not the ending. For many people, it becomes the first time in decades they finally get to live life on their own terms. And honestly, that chapter should begin from a position of strength. Not stress, not panic, not confusion, strength. So if you're approaching retirement or even thinking about it within the next 5 to 10 years, don't just ask yourself, when do I want to retire? Ask yourself, when does it make the most financial sense for me to retire? Because those two answers are not always the same. and sometimes adjusting your timing by even a few months can completely transform your financial future. The goal is not simply to retire as quickly as possible. The goal is to retire wisely, to retire confidently, to retire knowing your money, your healthcare, your taxes, and your income strategy are working together instead of against you. Because once retirement begins, you want to spend your time enjoying life, not fixing avoidable financial mistakes. And the good news is that with the right planning, you absolutely can create that future. A future where retirement feels peaceful, stable, intentional, and deeply rewarding. Not because you got lucky, but because you planned wisely before making one of the biggest decisions of your life.